Well, today we hear the Christmas story from the Gospel of John, or the opening verses of the Gospel of John. And it's not the typical way that we think about the story of Christ coming into the world, because we don't hear about Mary and Joseph in the stable. We don't hear explicitly about a baby. We don't hear any of the story elements that we hear in the Gospel of Matthew and Luke. But we hear about darkness and light coming into the world, and the light overcoming the darkness, and the darkness not being able to overcome the light wins. And this Advent that we had just before this Christmas day, we are in darkness. The days are getting shorter, and we actually had a longest night service here a few days ago, where we gathered in the church on the longest night of the year, acknowledging the darkness. And we pondered the fact that now, after the winter solstice, light comes into the world in the northern hemisphere, where we are, slowly each day. A little bit of light each day. A little bit more light comes into our lives. So on the winter solstice, it's the darkest length, the longest length of darkness, and then each day a little bit more light returns. And then maybe by January or February, we notice that light, but we didn't notice the incremental changes, but we notice all of a sudden there's more light in our life at the end of the day, or if we're early risers, maybe at the beginning of the day. And sometimes that's how Christ works in our lives. Here we hear that the light was coming into the world and the darkness did not overcome it. And sometimes God works like that. Sometimes God brings us hope. Sometimes God brings us life and light and grace, bit by bit by bit, with each moment, with each day. And then we look and we're suddenly a little bit lifted out of our darkness or our pain or our suffering. And that may have been how, or that may be how God works in our lives now. Bit by bit, God brings us light and life and grace. The other way that God can work is all of a sudden, here is God in the stable, breaking forth in the darkness, like the Big Bang, right? The light just coming out of the darkness all at once. And so maybe that is how John is describing it. As Jesus was born in that stable, the light just poured out in abundance. And sometimes we feel God working in our life like that. We're in the dark. We don't know where to turn. We're in the midst of pain, and suddenly Christ shows up, and we are filled with love and light and abundance and life and grace, and we don't turn back. And God fills our life from that moment forward. And that may have been how Christ's birth was, and maybe today we feel that, or maybe there are moments in our lives when we feel Christ just coming into our life with light and healing the darkness and healing the pain. And we can follow that light, we can follow Christ, and we can even be Christ's light. Maybe we can be Christ's light in that incremental way in our lives that we follow day by day. Maybe there's someone who needs light. Maybe there's someone who needs life, or the hand of God, and God can work through us day by day to bring that to that person, or to the world, or to this community. And maybe God can work through us in that sudden way, that surprising way, and we can be the light for someone, or a group of people, or a community, or the world, by capturing that Christ's light of Christ's birth within us and shining it out to the world, to a neighbor in need, to a friend, to your community, or to the world. So today we give thanks for this Christmas story in John's Gospel of Christ being the light of the world. And that's also why we have candles, to remind us of Christ's light that's always in our lives, always accessible, that we can always follow, and that we can be for the world. We can be vessels of Christ's light for this world. So on this Christmas morning, we give thanks for this little bit alternative Christmas story from John. We give thanks for the light that is pouring into our lives today. We give thanks that we can follow this light and share it abundantly with others. Amen.